Hello and welcome to Talk Comics. Thanks. This is Mike Carey. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure, Eli.
So I've been looking at the stuff that you've been doing and reading a lot of the things that you've been up to, and I've noticed, number one, that you're up for an award at the coming Fantasy Con.
British Fantasy Award, yeah, that's right.
For the Unwritten.
Yep.
And for those that don't know, could you tell us a little bit about the Unwritten?
Well, the Unwritten is it's a fantasy story about a guy who may or may not be a fictional character. We were largely inspired by the autobiography of Christopher Milne, who was the Christopher Robin of the Winnie the Pooh books. And Christopher Milne complained as an adult that he'd had his childhood stolen from him by his father, that being the protagonist of the Winnie the Pooh stories, being famous everywhere but famous as somebody else's creation, was actually quite a traumatic experience for him. And what we do in the Unwritten is we kind of reimagine that situation, but instead of being in the Winnie the Pooh books, our character Tom Taylor is the hero of a series of fantasy novels about a boy wizard who goes to wizard school and makes friends with a whole bunch of other wizards. And it has allusions, let's say, to a very famous series of fantasy novels that's around at the moment, but it also has a lot of other literary influences. Ultimately, it's about the ways in which stories are important to us, how stories impact on the real world, the interplay between reality and fiction.
When you talk about the Unwritten with respect to, say, for example, reality and fiction, you know, a lot of people when they're writing comics, they've been going down this route of the superhero route, and the Unwritten is another really good example of a popular comic that didn't have that superhero, but yet has that kind of magical fantasy kind of attributes to it.
Yeah, definitely magic realist stroke fantasy. I have the privilege of working for Vertigo. You know, my career in American comics started there, and I've always had a presence there. I don't think there's been a point at any time in the last 9 years when I haven't been writing a Vertigo book of some kind. And you know, one of the things that Vertigo has done is to create this stage on which you can tell non-genre stories, or stories from genres that are not usually associated with the American mainstream. It's been called the HBO of comics, and I think that's a fair analogy.
Yeah, I mean, especially where I heard about you personally first, which was through the famous Lucifer saga. And I know you've done a lot of work before that, but the Lucifer saga really brought your name right to the forefront of a lot of people's mouths.
I hadn't done that much before Lucifer, to be honest.
Oh, really?
Lucifer was what broke me in at DC. Up to that point, I'd done a lot of indie work, but I'd say a lot of indie work. I'd done a couple of things for the UK publisher Apocalypse Press,
right?
Who did the Toxic anthology very briefly in the early 90s. And then I'd done some work for Malibu just before they were bought out by Marvel, and some stuff for Caliber, a couple of mini-series for Caliber, and a graphic novella. That was the sum total of my published work. And then I was lucky enough to do the Sandman Presents Lucifer miniseries, and then Sandman Presents Petrifax.
Yes.
So I kind of got in at Vertigo by writing some of those spin-off titles.
And you went on to write one of their lead sets of comics, Hellblazer, as well.
That's right, for 3 years. Yeah.
I mean, that's I think the second longest after Ennis, possibly.
It could well be, yeah.
So that's a big win.
That was wonderful. That was absolutely wonderful. Ironically, when Will Dennis called me to offer me Hellblazer, or to invite me to pitch for Hellblazer, I politely declined. I said,
really?
I can't possibly do that, because I was already writing Lucifer as a monthly, and I didn't believe then that anybody could write 2 monthlies at the same time. And Will said, well, look, I'm not going to take that first answer. I'm going to give you a couple of days to think about this, and then you call me and tell me if you change your mind. And I did.
What changed your mind? What was the biggest thing?
Well, I just thought, this is crazy. I can't not do this.
Yeah.
He's an iconic character. He's a character I absolutely love. It would be to turn it down out of cowardice would have felt wrong. And so I went for it, and it turned out you can write 2 monthlies at the same time. In fact, at certain points in my career, I've written 4 monthlies and a novel at the same time. So you just you keep on pushing the boundaries.
I suppose you don't know how far you can go until you try the next level and see if you can actually achieve it.
Yeah, and there is a sense. There's definitely there's a comfort zone wherein the fact that you're working really hard already spurs you on to greater heights. So that the more pressure, the more inventive you get. Now there has to be a ceiling. There has to be a point at the end of that where
A quality control
you start to
sort of.
fall apart. Yes, quality control goes. Stress starts to impact on your work, and things disintegrate. So I've been operating in that zone, I guess. I've been working really flat out for the last 3 years, but really enjoying it and working on stuff I love, which is a huge privilege, really.
To portray you as an indie writer wouldn't really be fair, especially as you've done a lot of work for Marvel, including X-Men.
Yeah, I've done some mainstream superhero work, and I've loved that too. X-Men was a dream job as well as Lucifer, because I grew up with those characters. The first American comics that I read and loved were Fantastic Four and X-Men. It was hard back in those days, Liverpool in the 60s, to get those comics as they came out. It was British editions anyway, British reprint editions, but you couldn't always get them month to month. You just picked up whatever was available and devoured it. But X-Men had a special place in my heart, and being able to add chapters to that story, to a story that you read as a child, is a very, very special thrill, I think.
You're writing, or you've written, I should say, Age of X. You wrote that story up. Had you read, obviously, The Age of Apocalypse before you entered that? Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, X-Men has a long and honourable tradition of alternate reality stories.
Yeah.
And what I pitched to Daniel was a story that would be a huge fake-out, that would look like an alternate reality story and actually would resolve as something very different. So that was the idea, play with the Age of Apocalypse scenario.
How much do you feel that you have to know about the characters before you... I mean, is it common for writers to go back and read a backlog of stuff before they start writing a character or writing a set of work?
I think you have to, yeah. I mean, there's 5,000 odd issues of X-Men related stuff out there, and it's a huge and convoluted and very rich backstory. You've got to know some of it at least. You've got to feel confident when you put these characters together that you're not missing something, missing a trick, because they have so much history with each other. So what I did when I got the gig, I borrowed a whole load of issues from friends. I, to my shame, bought some bootlegs, which I will destroy next month when I write my last X-Men Legacy script. They go in the bin. But basically, I tried to fill the gaps. I mean, I was an X-Men fan, so I knew a lot of the history, but nobody knows all of it. So I did my best to read around the areas where I felt I wasn't confident, and basically my pitch took the form of a list of the characters I wanted to use, and then what I would do with them in terms of relationships, in terms of character and story beats.
One of the things I have to say is I went to see you already in Comics Launchpad, where you gave an amazing lecture.
The talk on how to write for comics.
About how to write comics. Now, one of the things that I never understood or appreciated was the amount of detail that a writer seems to have to go through about the way they even talk, about understanding the way a character speaks. I got to hear your lecture about how you had to change the words so that it made the characters sound like themselves. And could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I don't think that the general public or the people, the fans out there, really understand sometimes what a writer has to go through to make sure that it doesn't just sound right, but feels right as well when you're reading it.
I think voice is all important, and it's something I kind of, to some extent, pride myself on differentiating voices and making character voices convincing. But within that, when you're dealing with the X-Men, some characters already have very distinctive voices, and you have to tune into their idiolect and then reproduce it. When I started writing Rogue, I instinctively backpedaled on the Southern Belle pronunciation that she has. So I wrote, when she says I wrote it as I, right, instead of AH, and a lot of fans felt that was a false note, and I felt myself when I read it, that's a false note, that's not how she sounds. So I bit the bullet and made it a little broader, a little more almost caricatured. Right. But that's kind of the way you have to write it. I think if I have a fault as far as dialogue goes, I tend to write in a kind of poetic and elusive style, and my characters use a lot of metaphors, a lot of imagery in their talk. And some people on comic book resources and uncannyxmen.net have complained that the characters sound too intellectual when I write them, which may be true. You know, the characters like Gambit, who normally have a sort of fairly straightforward way of talking, become a little bit too highfalutin.
Well, there's no IQ test that any of those characters have taken. So.
No, there isn't. And you know, let's be honest. Over 30 years, actually a lot longer than that, isn't it? 40 odd years. They've been written in many, many different styles. So there's a sense in which the voices go in and out. But I think every reader has a sense of what's right for a particular character, and they know when they're not getting it, when the character sounds false. So you have to try and write within that target.
Obviously, you've written comics, and I've seen that you've also been writing books, and that there may be some progress into the audio, TV, and visual now as well. So television, maybe series, movie, something like that. Could you tell us a little bit about the progress, what's been going on?
Well, the books, I've written 5 Felix Castor novels now. The first 3 are out in America, 5 are out in the UK. We sold the TV rights to a British company, but they reverted to us. They weren't able to get a series going. We've now got a deal going with an American producer, which is very exciting, which looks quite promising. I've also separately been writing a movie screenplay for Slingshot Pictures, which has now also been picked up by an American production company. I'm talking to the BBC about possible TV work. There's a lot of stuff happening at the moment. Of course, I've also been writing games. I wrote the X-Men Destiny game. So more and more I'm sort of branching out into other forms of writing, which is great because I think what you want to be ultimately is a storyteller. And I'm not saying that medium is unimportant. Medium is very important, but again, working within different media wakes you up to some of your own tics, your own habits of writing, and it makes you more conscious of what you're doing, and therefore it makes you vary your game a bit.
How do you think your writing's had to change, if at all, from the caption boxes in comics to, say, the long paragraphs, the descriptive writing that you might get in, say, a book, or the dialogue that you have to write for TV? I mean, that might be closer to, say, a comic, but a book maybe is different, like quite a lot different.
It is different. I mean, screenwriting is very hard because it's superficially so similar to comics. It was hard for me to get the hang of the differences, and the differences are crucial. Screenwriting is so stripped down, so pared down to its basics. There's no what's the phrase that Mary Shelley uses in Frankenstein? No proud flesh, nothing wasted, not a word wasted. And it was quite a challenge for me to make that transition. Writing a novel, by contrast, just felt like incredible freedom. Because when you write a comic, you have to sort of parcel out each beat. You have to sort of think, how many pages am I going to spend on each scene? Can I afford a splash here or a spread or whatever? You become a miser, sort of sharing out the space. And you have to, because you've only got 20 pages to tell that particular chapter of the story in. But a novel, it's as long or as short as you want it to be. So you've got this incredible freedom in terms of deciding what the size of the canvas is. And you've also got a freedom in that you live with a novel for much longer. With comics, the deadline is always right now. Send it in, do rewrites, get it out to the artist. You're always close to the wire. With a novel, you live with it for 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year. And if you're getting to chapter 20 and you want to change something in chapter 1 or chapter 2, you can do that. You can go back and completely mess with the structure at any stage. So writing novels is... I got drunk on power at first, writing the Castor novels. I just felt so much more in control of what I was doing.
Did you feel that that you'd almost got used to writing comics, and that when you changed to writing a novel, it was a completely different, bicycle to ride, if you like?
It was. I'll tell you what. Writing comics is the best school you can possibly have for storytelling, because it focuses you in on structure so much. When I came out of college and I was trying to write novels, because I wrote novels before I wrote comics, right. But they were crap. They were really huge, shapeless bags of story. Because my idea of writing a novel was you write chapter 1, and then you sit there drumming your fingers on the table until you get an idea for chapter 2, and then repeat until you get to the words at the end.
Okay, and now that you've progressed and that you've changed, you've moved over, you've written quite a lot of indie comics, you've written some superhero comics now. Is there a chance that you might cross that over and write an indie superhero comic, i.e., something that a creator owned that you've got in mind?
It's possible, yeah. I have talked to the Boom Studio guys about maybe doing a freestanding superhero book for them. I'm not sure what stage those negotiations are at the moment because we haven't talked for a while. But I do like superheroes, and superheroes, that's a genre that works better in comics than it does in any other medium. Most other genres, they got their start elsewhere. Superheroes didn't exist before comics, really. Okay, you could argue that novels like Gladiator fed into the superhero mythos, but the comics created the superhero mythos essentially. And I think they've still got things to say about superheroes.
Does that mean that in your mind you have an idea of the kind of powers, etc., that you want to see in the comic?
Yeah, I had a cool hook for a hero who would. Whose powers would initially be completely useless to him, and then gradually the situation in which they might become an advantage would develop.
That'd be actually very different to any, because normally you have the power, it's very obvious to what the situation that he can use it in. But yeah, I can imagine that can be quite difficult. So you have to create a situation where the power is going to fit.
Yeah. It was a cool idea, and it may or may not happen. But apart from that, I'm still talking to Vertigo editors about doing some more books for them. I'm still talking to Marvel guys about possible miniseries and so on. It was with great reluctance that I took my break from Legacy. I love the X-Men. I love the X-Men office, the editors there.
Oh, so you chose to leave rather than they decided to move it along?
Yeah, because I need a year basically to just do prose.
Right.
And a little bit of screenplay stuff.
Right. But the Unwritten's still going to continue?
Yep.
For a long time to come?
Probably for another 3-4 years. We have an end point in mind.
Oh, really? So you know the end of the story?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I know that's easy to say, but there's a payoff for Tom, which we decided before we ever wrote a single word of it. That's what we're building towards. It'll probably be about as long as Lucifer was, maybe a little bit shorter.
Right, so we can expect around 10 to 11 volumes?
Yes.
In trade paper, or hardcover, whatever, the trade paperback form. Right. Okay. Comic-wise, we're talking...
60, 70 issues.
Right.
Or so. We're doing something quite cool at the moment, which is that we're running it bi-monthly for 5 months. We're having a sort of an arc storyline, and then alongside it we've got 5 freestanding issues, which are kind of, in a way, they're the origins of all of our core cast and the origin of the Cabal. So it's we love doing the one-off stories. Issue 5, the Kipling issue, the 2 Mr. Bunn issues, the Choose Your Own Adventure. They've been some of our favourite issues. So being able to do 5 of them back to back without breaking up the story flow was a great opportunity.
Is it quite common for you to know the ending? I mean, did you know the ending for Lucifer well before you got to the 11th volume, etc.?
Yes and no. I mean, we always knew it was going to end with the second war in heaven. And that Lucifer was going to fight on the angelic side rather than on the side of hell. And we always knew that without giving too many spoilers away, we always knew that the role of God was going to be going to somebody else. That the Jehovah would resign, and that somebody else would have to sit on the throne of Prima Mobile and take over the role of God. Those things were decided. Some of the other beats, including some of the other important beats, just happened along the way. Christopher Rudd, who ultimately becomes a very, very important character, was somebody we just invented
right
along the way, and Gaudium and Spela similarly. So it was a mixture of planning and serendipity.
One of the things that I found out recently was that, talking to Ennis, that if Preacher was to be made into a movie, that there were problems with the fact that you had this kind of religion side of things, and that the Americans, with their concepts of religion, they don't like it being tampered with too much. Would you ever think there would be a problem with turning Lucifer into a TV series or a movie?
Huge problems, I think.
With the religion side of things.
You could do it as a movie, probably, if you handled it in a sensitive way. I don't think it could ever be a TV series. I think there would just be too much of an outcry. We had a tiny outcry when we started out. There were a few guys who popped up on the Vertigo message boards to threaten us with death and damnation. But
didn't stop you though.
Well, for the most part, I think we just flew under people's radar. You know, the Christian right in America is a very vocal and a very powerful force. But I think they just missed us. I just don't think we were important enough to register with them, fortunately.
So, in general, though, you felt that it could be turned into a movie rather than a TV series, because I got the kind of opposite response. I mean, you know, you've got quite a lot of books there, so there's a lot of cards to set up for the final showdown, in effect.
Well, and we're different from Preacher, and that Preacher is very, very irreverent and scathing, satirical and vicious. Lucifer, in many ways, is. If you can get past the fact that the devil is the hero, it's actually a fairly, I don't know how to put this. I mean, it's a book about issues of faith, and it's a book about free will and predestination. And, you know, a lot of the things that we're doing within that framework would not be offensive to a believer. And I've had Christians, I've had committed, practicing Christians come up to me and say that they love the book. But you've got Lucifer in the role of protagonist.
Yes.
The thing is, he's not a sympathetic protagonist, or he is only up to a certain point. Yeah, we can sympathise with his desire to be free, to escape from his father's plan and be his own man, because that's kind of Lucifer as every man. That's a struggle that we all face. To get away from parental influence and define ourselves. But beyond that, he's a monster. He's a total monster, and we don't make any bones about that. He's somebody who will ignore you so long as you don't get in his way. But if you become an irritant for a second, he'll snuff you out without thinking about it and not lose a second's sleep over it.
Yeah. Is there any sneak peeks that you can just quickly tell us that you're going to be something we should keep our eye open for you? You know, Mike Carey is going to be on this. We should definitely check it out.
Well, I've written a werewolf book for Raw Studios, which is Thomas Jane's imprint. So that's going to come out sometime in 2012. What else? Apart from that, it's just the Unwritten at the moment. The Sixth Caster novel I will be starting to write soon, so that will be out either late in 2012 or early 2013. And also I have a novel which is coming out in spring of next year, which I co-wrote with my wife and daughter. It's called The Steel Seraglio, and it's about the women of a harem in a fictional Middle Eastern city-state in the time of the Arabian Nights, who become an army and then form a government. And it's kind of a loose suite of stories that grows into a novel, and we're very proud of it.
Well, I'd like to thank you very, very much for spending the time to talk to us.
Pleasure.
And that's another wrap-up from us, I'm afraid. But we hope to see you guys again soon. So that's a thank you from us. I thank you as well.
Cheers, guys.
Take care.